To all of you that are pastoral leaders in the emerging generations, listen carefully. For too long, we've been sold a lie that leadership in the church looks like influence, that ministry is about scaling, not about shepherding, that success is measured in followers, not in faithfulness. Somewhere along the way, we traded the cross for a brand. We let consumer Christianity shape how we lead, turning pastors into CEOs, sermons into content, and the gospel into a product. However, Jesus wasn't a CEO. He wasn't an influencer. Jesus was and is the quintessential unleader, the anti-model to the empire-driven leadership we see today. Jesus calls us and is calling us to something different. He's calling us to something deeper. The way of the cross, the way of humility, the way of losing to truly lead. The leadership model we inherited, it is not working. Toxic systems have bred toxic leaders, and we're dealing with the fallout. To all emerging leaders, I'm inviting you on a journey. I want to talk to you for a moment about toxic systems and toxic leaders and how unexamined structures shape character. We talk a lot about toxic leadership these days. What if the real issue isn't just bad leaders? What if it's the systems that produce them? We see it everywhere. Leaders rising fast and falling just as quickly. And yet we keep asking the same question. How did this happen? What if the problem isn't just the individual failure, but a system designed to create it? And here's the hard truth. Systems shape people. The structure you lead in will form your soul. Listen carefully. The rise of the CEO pastor and the corporate mindset overtook the church a number of decades ago. Somewhere along the way, the church stopped asking what it means to be faithful and started asking what it means to be successful. And that shift changed absolutely everything. When pastors became brand managers, congregations turned into consumers, and the pulpit became a platform for influence rather than a place of sacred proclamation. We lost something essential. The CEO pastor is not a scriptural figure. He or she is a product of the industrialized, efficiency-driven culture that measures success by output, scalability, and visibility. In a world where corporate metrics determine value, we exchanged the slow, cruciform work of discipleship for expansion models and leadership strategies borrowed from Wall Street and Silicon Valley. I was part of that generation. What was once a sacred vocation formed by prayer, suffering, and wisdom has been repackaged into a career path measured by audience size, book deals, and social media reach. The shift, my friends, was not accidental. The late modern church, particularly in the West, has been shaped by the logic of consumer capitalism, where growth is the highest virtue. The megachurch phenomenon reinforced the belief that bigger is always better, that a church is healthy if it's expanding numerically, and that pastors are successful if they're building an empire. As theologian John Drain warned us in 2012, in the McDonaldization of the church, we began valuing efficiency over depth, control over mystery, and predictability over the unpredictable movement of the Spirit. We wanted to be in control. But what happens when you scale something that was never meant to be mechanized? You create systems that are unsustainable, leadership models that crush those within them, and an ecclesiology that rewards performance over authenticity. When pastors become executives, their congregations become an audience to be retained rather than a people to be shepherded. What's the result? Burnout, moral collapse, disillusionment, and a shallow spirituality that thrives on spectacle but lacks the substance that belongs to Christ. What's most troubling is that this model was never challenged, it was embraced. Christian leadership books began to quote business gurus more than they quoted Jesus. Church conferences became indistinguishable from corporate leadership summits. The pastors as visionary CEO became the default model, and the language of strategy and branding replaced the language of shepherding and servanthood. But here's the truth. Jesus never built an empire. He never strategized growth models. He never cultivated a personal brand. He never measured his influence by numbers. The moment the church forgets that leadership is cruciform, it exchanges the authority of the cross for the power structures of the world. And when the world sets the terms, the church loses its soul. So here's the question every emerging leader needs to ask themselves. Are you a shepherd or are you a CEO? Because the one lays down his or her life for the sheep, the other monetizes them. And if something in you is stirring as you hear this, if you're wrestling with what this means for your calling, you're not alone. These are the conversations we need to be having. What if we recovered the ancient path? What if we led like Jesus, not as corporate executives, but as shepherds? What if we rejected the McDonaldization of ministry, the fast food faith, the instant success models, the pressure to perform, and embraced something genuine and real that's faithful and theologically sound? The church of the future will be enchanted and mystical in the best sense of the word. It will be ancient and new. It will be built on cross-shaped, cruciform leaders, not corporate strategies. We're calling out the dysfunction and casting a vision for something far richer. The future belongs to those who refuse to play the game, to those who don't want a platform but want a calling, to those who are done with celebrity Christianity and hungry for something real. We need to recover what was lost. The global move of the Spirit depends on a generation of leaders that will not compromise. We need to build something that lasts based on the Christ who is the Alpha and the Omega, who is calling us from the future to the future. And we need to ask ourselves three pertinent questions. What is Jesus up to? Where is he going? Are we going with him? So here's the question. Are you willing to examine the system that is shaping you? Because if you don't, you're just waiting for the next collapse. Toxic systems, toxic leaders. If you want the cycle to end, I invite you to take a journey